Awesome, awesome. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you so much for coming out during your lunch break today. Welcome to Midwest Design Week, and welcome to the Cincinnati Diversity Coalition event, sponsored by Hyperquake. My name is Ashton, and I volunteer with AIGA Cincinnati as co-vice president. And AIGA Cincinnati is one of the 70 plus chapters of AIGA, the professional organization for design. This week, I mean, as most of you have already know, but just as a reminder for those who might be tuning in with us, mid to end week, we've got a really exciting lineup of events that are focused on the theme of culture in its many forms, including our keynote event on Friday night, Design for Liberation with Teresa Moses. All the information for all of our events for the rest of the week can be found on MidwestDesignWeek.com. This event would not have been possible without the support of our event sponsor this year, Hyperquake. Thank you, Holly, for your dedication in providing the best for our design community. And thank you also to all of our sponsors for this Midwest Design Week. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panelists for today. We have Tysonn Betts, Design Vice President at P&G, Jamie Grady, Senior Vice President in Financial Operations at Grey Group, Sean Rugless, President and Chief Strategist at Katalyst Group, and Holly Shoemaker, Creative Director at Hyperquake. Let's get started.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Sean Rugless. I wanted to provide an opportunity for our team, our esteemed panelists, to introduce themselves. So I'll kick it over to Jamie for a brief introduction.
I think we're going to start with Holly.
Oh, Holly, sorry, Holly.
Remember ladies first? I'm joking.
I saw
that. I'm Holly Shoemaker, Creative Director at Hyperquake, and I'm excited to be here for this hour with everyone here.
All right.
I'm Jamie Grady. As Ashton mentioned, I'm the SVP of Finance and Operations for Grey Midwest, which is an office within Grey Global Group, and really looking forward to talking to you all today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Tysonn Betts, Design Vice President at Procter Gamble, responsible for our family care and P&G Ventures businesses. Happy to see everybody.
All right, and Sean Rugless, I am a P&G alum out of the brand management system at P&G, the founder and chief strategist for the Katalyst Group. And we all wanted to welcome you to a timely and important conversation about how do we transform our industry. One of the opportunities that we have is to be able to start thinking about, as we think about the changing shifts that we're seeing in consumer context, mindsets, as well as diversity, we wanted to come together and talk about what is the level of transformation that needs to happen at the agency level as well as the client level to enable agencies, design firms, and marketing groups to make stronger connections with today's consumers. Today, we'll explore a couple of things. First, we'll talk about why this conversation is so important. Secondly, we will talk about our shared experiences along this journey. And then lastly, we'll have a conversation about what authentic engagement looks like around stepping up. And so to get things started, what we wanted to do was kind of see what was on your minds. We're going to switch to a question here. Some of you may have seen it, but we have a quick poll. The first question within our poll gets into how diverse do you think that the advertising industry are? So specifically, what level of diversity for African Americans is found in the creative industry? We're talking agencies, we're talking design firms, as well as marketing groups. You got three choices, more than 15%, between 5 and 15%, and then the last response would be less than 5% Black. I'll give you a second to enter your results. Okay, we see that the majority of the group, probably around 60% of us on the call today, would say that it's less than 5%. A good 30% or 40%, close to 40% would say it's between 5 and 15, and one response says that it's over 15%. So we'll go back and ask you one more question, and we'll talk about the results in a second.
Yes, Sean, we have the results next in the deck for that question, and then we go to the principal.
Okay.
If I can get my, there we go.
All right. So the results for this, the reason why this is important, here's the results here. What we'll see is that this was a study done by the Association for National Advertisers, which includes a host of our brands as well as agency partners to talk and look at diversity. And so we broke, the data breaks it out into two levels. One, individuals who are leading organizations such as CMOs or the presidents of agencies, and then the overall population. What we'll see is African Americans make up about 3% of all leaders in the advertising, marketing, and design industry. And even if we brought it out bigger, make up just 6% of the total industry. Hispanics make up another 5% along with Asians. But the key takeaway here is that 87% of CMOs and leaders within these respective organizations are non-ethnic. All right, so we'll go back to our second poll. As you think about our craft and the reason that we're here, our job is to make consumer connections, right? We are to propel brands to authentically connect with these consumers. And so if we were to talk about what today's population looks like in terms of consumers, what percentage of Black consumers make up today's, Black people make up today's consumer population? All right, we'll give you a couple of seconds here. All right. So the majority of people would say, close to 80% of the people would say that more than 15% of consumers are African American, between 5 and 15%, and then less than 5% of all consumer goods that are purchased by African Americans. Okay. We'll go to what our findings are. And this is not a new phenomenon. What we're finding is that up to maybe 5 to 10 years ago, brands as well as agencies and marketers overall recognize that the face of our consumers have shifted. And so according to the US Census, African Americans comprise 13% of the total US population, Hispanics another 18%, and 6%. And so what we're finding is there's a term the US Census has called majority minority. And maybe 10 years ago, what majority minority really means is when your population for any particular area tops 50% ethnic minority. And maybe 5 or 10 years ago, that was maybe 6 states and 15 cities. We're now well over 10 to 15 states that are majority minority, and close to 40% of major cities, metropolitan markets, are now a large percentage of ethnic minorities. So we'll go to the next slide. So why is this? Why are we even having this discussion? Well, McKinsey study found that, and when you start to add diversity to all layers of your organization, you have just a more productive organization. So we're not talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a nice thing to do. We have found, and has been strongly researched, that when you start to add cultural and gender diversity into your organizations, they perform better and they make more money. And so what you see here is, two things happening. One, when we start to talk about gender diversity, when executive teams are 20 more diverse from a gender standpoint, they're 20% more likely to outperform those who are not, and 24% more likely to have a value creation. When we start to talk about ethnicity, that jumps up to 33% more likely to have industry-leading profitability. And so the reason that discussion is important is because one of the things that our industry will be facing is how does it transform ourselves to make more meaningful connections to ethnic consumers? And what we found is that we have to embed the insights. Go to the next slide. And so we're in a business of insight. And so what we want to do is conclude this conversation or this wrap-up piece by saying that insight fosters relationship. Brands get better, agencies get better, design gets better when we're wrapped around an authentic insight that we can manifest into our creative product. And what we're saying in the context of what the data is saying, as well as what the trends are in terms of the social climate is saying, is that we all now need to be proficient in this area, and it's vital that we begin to diversify the pipeline of professionals, Black professionals, professionals of color in our industry. And so with that, I'll turn it over to have a broader discussion with regard to how this is showing up among 3 of the professionals here that are on the panel.
Thanks, Sean. I'll go first. So, as being the finance and operations lead for the Great Midwest office, one of the things that I'm tasked with in partnership with our leadership team is to, create a foundation of a business and a business strategy that not only makes sure we're successful this year, but we are set up for future success and future longevity within this industry. And also, I'm, being part of operations, I am responsible for the talent and HR in our office as well, which is actually a great intersection of the two on this specific topic because, from my perspective, if we want to be, successful in the future and we want to be future-proofed as an agency in this industry, we have to be putting out the best work we possibly can at all times, and it has to be able to speak to the consumer we're speaking to. And in order to speak to the consumer base, as Sean showed earlier, the makeup of our consumer base in America, we need the different viewpoints, cultural experiences, life experiences of the consumer base we're speaking to. Otherwise, we can't speak to that consumer base. So by making our talent base more diverse and specifically diverse from a Black perspective, it's going to strengthen the work that we put out in the EOS, and it's going to speak more authentically to the consumers we're trying to speak with, which then makes our work better for our clients and ensures that my clients continue to come back for more of that work so I can keep on earning money to pay my people and keep this business running, right? So from my perspective, from that operations finance business perspective, it's paramount that we solve this challenge and get this right internally if we want to be able to be around in 3 to 5 years from now and be successful at what we do.
Tysonn.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll jump in because I think my sentiments echo a lot of what Jamie has shared, right? And so I think about this and approach this subject both as a trained designer, as well as someone who sits on the client side of things, interfacing with creatives and creative agencies throughout the industry. I think, minimally, the perspectives and solutions that are delivered are going to be better when we have a more diverse populace of designers and creators working on that work. And so I think it inherently creates a rising tide that makes everything better. I think it also helps to ensure that there's a reasonable amount of sensitivity that goes into the creative that's delivered. I'm sure we've all seen at some point some of the creative that gets delivered, and you kind of wonder who was in the room when those things were approved or what the discussion was. And I think, that there is a good expectation that with more diversity, more folks around the table, that there will be an increased sensitivity to what kind of creatives we're producing, both to combat implicit bias, but also in some cases, the explicit bias that may go into the creative being produced. From a client standpoint, I also think, I have to hold the folks that I work with to the same standard that I would hold myself. And so I need for these agencies and the way we practice creativity to reflect the same values that I do and have and want to reflect within the company, that's reflected within the consumer base that we're trying to serve. So all of those things, I think, from a business standpoint, are wickedly important. But even beyond that, part of kind of my interest and my passion in this space is even opening up additional career options for folks who have traditionally not been invited to be a part of this, or just simply were not aware to be a part of the creative industry, and thereby I think making the industry as a whole better.
And where I'll kind of tie this up for I sit as a former client as well as being part of a global design firm, I'm kind of sitting in the middle now as a brand strategist and consultant. There's two sides to this that we have to keep our minds and perspectives on. The first piece is there's a growing expectation from our clients that the teams that are working on their brands will be diverse. And so what we're starting to see is that every year, a lot of clients are asking, hey, what does the level of diversity look like in your agencies? And usually that response is, a relatively low level of diversity. But what we're seeing as of within the last month, and then one of the largest advertisers in the world, Procter Gamble, just released a piece on their website that added transparency as it relates to what does diversity look like within their organization from a marketing function. And so within making that move, what P&G has done is provided transparency as well as accountability around this area of getting a strong pipeline of African Americans, Hispanics, and Asians into significant positions. And so the reason that that is significant is because not only are they adding transparency and accountability to themselves, they're going to have heightened expectations for who they partner with to bring their brand propositions to market. The second side of it then, as you go to the other side of the table, is that we have to recognize that in the creative industry, we're the only product in the world that is produced by someone's inspiration, vision, and shared experience. And so it's not an automobile where you pick up a widget and you put a screw on and then all of a sudden there's a product. We are the culmination of people's inspirations. And it goes within our product. So what we have to do is begin to start thinking about, are we fostering climates that unleash the full potential of creative thinking, right? And have we diversified the people that are within our systems and our pools so that we get a better creative product? And so what we're seeing is on both sides of the table, both the client expectation as well as the agency's product development, there is this call to action to begin to start to transform the agency to be more conducive with a stronger pipeline for communities of color. Which is why we have jumped into this. So I'll turn it over to Jamie to talk about at least what our collective approach has been.
Yeah, and I'll get in shortly to how the collective came to be, but where we've gotten to and all those things we just talked about have led us to this vision that we have. And our vision is we want to transform the creative industry by enabling environments that uncover and harness the power and potential that's found within the Black creative professionals, have respect for their contributions, and define a pathway for their growth, to foster and nurture them, to grow them, and thus grow the effectiveness of the work we're doing. And it's not a typical, our industry is not a typical path one thinks of if you're not in design school, right? And especially at the junior high and high school level, and specifically in underserved demographics, it's not something that's really made aware. So sometimes people just fall backwards into this industry if they end up in it. Myself, I felt backwards in it. I did not know it existed until I got an internship in it a long time ago. Fell in love with it and have never left. But I'm going to kick it over to Tysonn, and he's also going to talk about his journey and how he, as a Black designer, got into this industry. Tysonn, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Thanks, Jamie. I think the journey has been both serendipitous and a blessing, right? So I've had the fortune to kind of take a journey through creative lessons throughout my entire life, having graduated from a fine arts high school and then going on to Maryland Institute College of Art, where I studied graphic design and visual communication. I left MICA and came to P&G just a short 24 years ago. But in that journey, it never really dawned on me just how much of a unique individual I was, in the sense that there was not a ton of diversity within design until I started to take on more responsibility at Procter Gamble. Part of that being both being responsible for nurturing and developing the agencies that we work with, and really taking a look around those agencies and asking why there was not more diversity there. Also being responsible for recruitment and development of new design managers to the company. And a part of doing that is also making sure that we are meeting and growing what our own diversity goals are in terms of what the population of the company looks like, and being sure that that reflects the population of the community that we are serving. And the more you get into those numbers, the more bleak you really see and understand that they are, but that then drives a different conversation of then why and what do we do about it, right? My passions have always been in the areas of community service, and that service has kind of introduced me to different people and different paths, but they all lead back to design. So having done work with Elementz before, which is an urban arts organization in Cincinnati, and using that as an opportunity to really introduce design to more young people and help them see that as an option. But that really becomes the crux of the issue in terms of how to answer the question that we're talking about today. The reality is most don't really see design as an option or a career path, not because it's not viable, but simply because the career itself is largely invisible, right? So in our day-to-day lives, we generally don't see designers. We see all kinds of other professionals. We see all kinds of other tiles and signs hanging up for accountants and lawyers and tailors and merchants of all sorts. But design is not one of those things that's typically on the front, yet it is one of the things that impacts almost every aspect and facet of our lives. And so, I believe that fundamentally one of the reasons we are where we are is simply because design is invisible. And I would challenge us all to think, like, how does one choose a career path that he or she doesn't know exists? So it's a pretty difficult thing. And through the work that we've begun now, hoping to really be able to expose more young people to design, and in doing so, not only increase the likelihood that we get more better designers, but at the same time, we're helping the industry and the individual. I mean, I think it's really, it really is a multifunctional, multi-pronged solution that if we get it right, and I think we want to get it right, it will have a lasting impact on the industry as a whole. My journey has not been perfect, but the hope is that we can use those experiences along with the others to really help figure out how to better perfect the industry and the path to it.
So what we're going to do right now, everybody, is give you a thought starter that we want you to think about for when we get to the Q&A session. But what would agencies, design firms, and other companies in the creative industry need to say or exhibit to you, or from your perspective, in order to attract Black talent? So think about that as we move on. But it's something that is really relevant to think about, and I think it's a question that any agency, design firm, or creative industry company, is striving to find that answer. So we're going to go in and talk a little bit about how this coalition was born, and kind of to set it up. As I mentioned before, one of my tasks is to oversee human resources. And when I joined Gray Group, or at the time our office was called Possible, a little over 5 years ago, we had a newly formed leadership team for this business. And one of the main focuses that we wanted to work on for the agency that we were taking leadership over for was to increase the diversity in our staff, for all the reasons I stated before. And it's something the talent team and myself worked extremely hard on for many years with not a whole lot of success. We've tried things, different things, thrown spaghetti at a wall, seeing what stick, tried to get more pointed about it. But rewind about 12 months ago, almost 12 months ago in October, there is a conference in Cincinnati that's happened the last few years called Brandemonium. And my talent manager, Rachel, and myself attended a breakout session in that conference. It was kind of a TED Talk type session. And the panelists happened to be Sean and Tysonn. We sat through their talk, and I did not know Sean prior to this, and I barely knew Tysonn. He was a client at my former organization, but I never worked directly with him. So we knew of each other, but we didn't know each other closely. So we sat during their talk, and it was really specifically on this topic, essentially, why it's important to have, Black diversity in the design world, and how it needs to happen immediately. And so Rachel and I went up and talked to Sean and Tysonn afterwards, and we wanted to just get a little bit more insight as to what they've both done individually as part of their organizations on this, share kind of some of the things that we were doing, and maybe this ends up being a knowledge share. We learn from each other a little bit, and we can get a little bit better. So, shortly after the talk, they came over to our office and we kind of had a brainstorm and started talking about that. And very quickly, what I think the group realized in the meeting was, if we all continue to try to attack this separately, we are not going to be successful. That we have such a powerful creative and design community in the city. Why not bring that community together to solve this challenge? Then we get the economies of scale of not just money, but time to be able to be devoted towards it, the amazing and intelligent minds that we have in all of this industry that we can bring to solve this challenge. And it becomes not as huge of a piece to bite off for any one person, right? Because we're going to share in this collectively together. So very quickly, after we started meeting, we determined that was what we wanted to do. We wanted to bring this coalition, or create this coalition to bring the agencies together. And so we've spent the last 9 months kind of really building out, what does this coalition look like and how does it come to life? We haven't actually launched the coalition yet, so there are not companies that are formally part of it yet, but we have gone out into the community and talked to the companies within the industry and have a lot of amazing support for the idea and want to join and help us. So we got to the point now where we are, we're getting close to formally launching the coalition. And we're going to create a separate nonprofit outside of any of the companies that we want a part of it to kind of steer and run this. And we'll get into some of the strategy of how we're going to approach the challenge that we face and some of the ideas that we have. But it's going to be an ever evolving thing, especially as we bring the companies into the coalition. We want that not outside thought, but outside the group that's been working on this for the last really year, 9 months heavily, once we realized it was going to be a coalition to do so. So we crafted a mission for our coalition, and I'm going to kind of walk you guys through that very quickly. But our mission is essentially to make careers in the creative industry obtainable and inclusive by forging environments that, one, drives awareness of the career options within our industry to these underserved communities. Secondarily, increasing the level of exposure of Black creative talent in the industry and in the companies they're in the community that we're in, and foster the skill sets they need to drive business with that diversity and thought. We also are going to create opportunities to showcase the contributions that are made by this Black creative talent and expand the networks of Black creative professionals beyond their individual companies. And we'll talk a little bit later why that's important. And then finally, we need to establish a formal pipeline to leadership and areas of influence within the organization. So really, not every person that goes into a company is going to go to leadership or wants to go to leadership, but outlining what that pipeline looks like, what that path looks like, and creating a pipeline of Black talent, so that not only does the makeup of our companies reflect the target demographic that we're speaking to, but also that it's also there at the leadership level. Because just solving it by bringing in low and mid-level, diversity, and only keeping it there, but having the leadership of those organizations not representative of the makeup of your organization itself, doesn't create a successful environment for that talent to thrive. And if you don't create that successful environment, you will never keep that talent, and that talent will never reach their fullest potential. And as our job as leaders of whether it be client-side P&G, our own agency in Katalyst, or operations and finance, when you're a leader of an organization, your first, and especially in this industry, your first and most important job is to nurture and grow the talent that you have. That is number one on your priority list, regardless of what discipline that you sit in. So I'm going to hand it over to Tysonn, and he's going to kind of walk through a mantra slide of what we believe, and kind of like the inspirational page that tells what we stand for.
Thanks, Jamie. I will articulate what's here, as you guys can see, but I think this adequately and profoundly captures the work that we're trying to do. To state that we believe that the creative industry can be a place of creative excellence, and that creative excellence cannot exist without a more diverse thought. We believe that without a clear trajectory for the Black community to succeed, we're not succeeding as a whole. We believe that the creative industry is one that doesn't reflect change in its mind, but creates it. And to do so, we must begin with establishing and nurturing Black talent and crafting inclusive, equitable leadership. We must construct resources that are accessible at all levels, from the students to the CEOs and everyone in between, that hold us responsible for inclusive thinking, understanding, and action. We must provide communities within our organizations by Black people, for Black people, to amplify their work, their experience, and their expertise. We must establish paths for younger generations, especially those who have been underrepresented, to be exposed to creative industries and opportunities early on. By believing and investing in reconstruction of every aspect of creative industries, we will forge forward into more equitable workplaces and more genuine and impactful work. We will reach unmatched diversity of thought that benefits our people, our industry, and the world we have been given as an audience. We will become an industry that creates change, that enforces it, and that believes there is no better time than now to do it. I think this, really captures a lot of the conversations we've had this morning. The perspectives that Sean had from his former and current career trajectory, what Jamie sees and his responsibilities from an agency side and being responsible for HR and people development, as well as the perspectives that I have from a client side, and really trying to figure out how we not only sustain the industry, but fuel the pipeline that will carry that industry forward.
Yeah, thanks, Tysonn. And every time I've read that and I've heard it read out loud probably 50 times to this point, and it still honestly gives me goosebumps every time I hear it, because to me it's very powerful. It's a statement of what we really do believe and what we're going to accomplish and what is the right thing to do. And to me, that's super exciting. The next slide I'm going to pull up, don't focus too hard on it because it's a bit of an eye chart. It's got a lot of information. I'm pulling it up. I'm going to talk through a little bit about it, but it's just, the next slide is meant to kind of give you all a sense of how we're thinking about this from a strategic standpoint and how we're going to execute against this. So like I said, eye chart, but essentially the way we've chosen to approach this is we believe that there's kind of 4 strategic pillars to solving this challenge, right? The first pillar that we have to work on is awareness, and that's one, creating awareness, as Tysonn talked about a little earlier in the presentation, within the community, that this is actually a career option. So especially in those underserved communities. If you're a kid that's sitting in math class, don't quite get it, but you're doodling, drawing amazing stuff, and that's what really inspires you, that doesn't mean you're not intelligent. It means you have a skill that can go down a different path, and we want to make sure you're aware that that's actually a career path that can bring you an amazing and fruitful career for the rest of your life, should you so choose to do that. So we need to create that awareness, and one of the ways, or some of the ways that we intend to do that, is we're going to create some partnerships with local, predominantly minority high schools, also partnering with minority colleges, or HBCUs, which is historically Black colleges and universities, to make sure that the student base there and the educators are aware, especially at the junior high and high school level, that the educators are aware that this is a career path for their students. We also are going to create awareness to the parents. We want the parents of these students to be aware, so that they don't see it as a bad thing that their kid is doodling or has this passion for art and creativity. And yet, yes, you can make money as artists. You don't have to be a starving artist. And then we have to create awareness for our city as a destination for creative talent and within the creative industry. I mean, Cincinnati's if you're in the industry, Cincinnati's known as the branding hub of the world, right? Because of Procter Gamble and its history. I mean, Procter Gamble created the first brand that ever existed, and really are the ones that built the idea of brand. But if you're not in the industry, you don't know that. So we got to create awareness for our industry. Next, we've obviously got to recruit the talent, and that goes through partnerships with different colleges, career fairs, targeting other cities to make sure they know Cincinnati has these opportunities, et cetera. But making the talent aware and bringing them in, we can't stop there, because that's not success. You bring them in, if you don't do anything from that point forward, they're not going to stay very long, right? So the next thing we have to do and focus on is growing that talent and harnessing their skills. And we broke that down in kind of two sections. One, we need to do that within the community and the industry, right? So we need to celebrate the work of Black professionals in the creative industry. We need to promote their work publicly. We have several ideas around local award shows and adding categories specific to this, maybe competitions to showcase work. And then within the company, the leadership needs to create pipelines for leadership, as we talked about earlier. They need to create an environment that allows for the voice to be heard and recognition to be given to this talent. Providing appropriate skill training is an important thing. Celebrating the work within the company, and then probably even most importantly is paying Black talent equal to white talent in each company. And then, also, and I won't say finally, because this is like a cycle, it's an ongoing continuous cycle, but the final pillar of our strategy is we call inclusion, and that's how do we retain the talent, right? And so we need to create a feeling of connectedness and belongingness, right? So we need to do that within the community and the industry. So, Tysonn or Sean, or if you talk to any of the Black talent we have at Great Midwest, they'll tell you, you come into a company like that, and there's not many people that look like you, right? You're in the minority of the demographic of the company. So immediately there's a sense of not belonging or disconnectedness. So how do we create a network within the community to connect? Because there are a decent amount of Black professionals in this industry. How do we connect them together so they have that sense of connectedness and belongingness within the industry and within our community? And then also within each company, you have to create an inclusive environment where anybody feels welcome, feels like they have the chance to succeed, feels like they have the right to fail fearlessly. And you do that in a lot of different ways. And as a collective, we're not going to tell a company how to run their business or run their culture. What we intend to do is provide a toolbox or guidance should companies need it on how do you create a more inclusive environment through policy changes, through cultural things that you might do for your company's culture, and through specific trainings. One thing, or there's kind of like, in order to join the collective, we're basically requiring 4 things of any company that's going to join the collective, and these are deal breakers. So if a company's not willing to commit to any of these 4 things, we won't allow them in the collective, because we won't believe that they're fully invested in actually achieving what we're trying to achieve. First and foremost, they have to commit to pay equally, and we'll be asking to do audits regularly on that to ensure that they are paying equally from a Black talent perspective. Second, they have to commit to doing annual diversity and inclusion training for their entire staff, and annual incremental on top of that diversity and inclusion training for their leadership team. It's incredibly important. If they're not interested in training and learning and growing in that, they're not truly committed to the change we're trying to make. Third, there's a monetary requirement. You have to put some skin in the game cash-wise. We have things that we want to accomplish that are going to cost money, like attending career fairs. One of the big things we want to do is at least 1 scholarship per year that will send a kid that has talent and is interested in pursuing a career in this through 4 years of college, and doing 1 of those per year. So at any given time, we'll basically have 4 times tuition that we have to pay for out of the collective. And there's a whole lot of other things that we're going to need money for to do. So that's important. And then you have to commit to donating time and hours, right? This is a labor of love. It's a passion. It's a night job for anybody that joins it. And we need help. We cannot do it on our own. So we need these companies to commit time to help us accomplish these tasks. And that's actually probably, I'm going to segue because that's a great segue, but we have goals and KPIs listed at the bottom, and those are placeholders. They're going to be co-created. The only thing I would point to that is we're going to create goals and KPIs because we want to be measurable and held accountable to what we're trying to achieve. It's not meant to just be this, willy-nilly, we kind of shoot from the hip thing. No, we really want to hold ourselves accountable and measure ourselves against what our goals are. But back to the, having to invest time in this, it's a good segue to, we went out as a coalition to the branding community, to the four biggest really branding companies in Cincinnati, to ask for help. We need our organization to be named, and we need a brand identity created for our organization. So we went to four agencies, and there was a lot of great interest, but we really had one agency step up and answer the call like no other. And the amount of enthusiasm they've had from the first day that we spoke with them has just been incredible. They've been incredible partners so far, and we're just at the beginning, so I can't wait to see where it takes us. But that partner is Hyperquake, that has answered the call to take that on for us. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Holly just to talk a little bit about that.
Almost forgot to unmute myself. So thank you, Jamie. And yes, we were really excited about this opportunity, and it kind of just was part of our journey. So quickly, I think what started to get our company to have bigger conversations was really once all this, the George Floyd protests were happening. As a company, yes, we're all working remote, but we wanted to talk. We just needed to talk to each other. And this started with this greater sense of awareness of racial injustices that were happening in our country. And we really reflected as a Hyperquake team, as individuals and as a team, of how can we be more deliberate? How can we actually create meaningful, positive change? And really as a company, we determined that we could just start to reflect on our own core values. We have some very strong core values. And what we could do is say, okay, how do we live up to our core values even more? How can we create a diverse, inclusive, and equitable organization? And from here, we created I guess you could call it our own little coalition within Hyperquake, the Diversity, Inclusion, and Growth Coalition. And so we created our own group. And what we realized was, as just Hyperquake, it wasn't enough. It's just what Jamie said. Once you work together and you start to join forces, it becomes stronger and you can make such a bigger impact. And Cincinnati is just thriving as a creative industry, but it's not thriving with, when I look at Black creatives, we're very limited. And so how can we bring people to our city? And so we committed to really educating ourselves, learning. And then what we realized is, how do we start to reach out to some of our partners? Now, Tysonn, we've worked with him at P&G on multiple different projects. And so we reached out to him as a community leader. And what really started to happen as we started to have this conversation, he really started to talk about all of the work that he was doing with Sean and Jamie, and where we could step up and where we could start to help and where we could really start to create impact within the, this industry that we're in, that we all know can be amazing. Just as Sean said, creatives have the ability to tell stories like no other, and they're able to reach people like no other and tell emotional stories and really kind of bring people with them. And so we have that opportunity to, how can we tell this bigger story to make sure that we are creating this inclusive environment, and really building something amazing together with the community. So Hyperquake is incredibly excited. We are in the process of naming, and we're sharing that tomorrow with this team. So we're looking forward to really building together. So we're honored to be part of it.
We're very lucky to have you over there at Hyperquake, Holly, and thankful for your contribution. I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. We have, a little over 10 minutes left, and I wanted to, open the floor up for questions, thoughts, responses to the thought starters. Because one of the things we kind of wanted this to be too is a little bit of market research for us, and that thought starter was a bit of a market research question, like what should we be doing? What should we be thinking about? But we also want to be here to answer any questions you may have on the coalition, what we're what we've been doing, what we plan on doing, or anything else that you might have in regards to this topic. So I don't know, is there a hand raise button in Zoom, or is there a chat to submit questions? How I'm a Teams person, not by choice but by force. So I don't really know Zoom technology as well.
Yeah, no. So some people have been putting some questions in the chat here, and so our team has been kind of collecting them. So Ashley, do you want to read the first one that we've got?
Yeah. Let's see. So Steve Thomas asks, it's kind of wordy, so hopefully I don't trip over it. How do you counter the notion that you shouldn't get hired because of your race? I understand the impact of seeing someone that looks like you or in your culture, but this is an excuse given when the idea comes up, aka people who are against affirmative action and the like.
I can answer that from my perspective as a person that's in charge of hiring. I don't think we hire because of race. So I'm not going to hire, just a black person because they're black. They obviously have to have, some skill set that's going to be able to do the job that they're asked to do. The idea is more about creating a pool of candidates where there is a good representation of skilled black talent that can do this job. So it's not the idea of the coalition and the change we're trying to make is not diversity for the sake of diversity, right? It's actually about improving the work. So so that would be my response. I mean, we're not going to hire somebody just because of the color of their skin, but what we are going to realize is the value that the color of skin might bring, specifically from a black perspective, because of the cultural experiences that they've had that they can bring to the work, the different perspectives that they have that they can bring to the work. So that is a skill, and that is a value, and that's not because of their skin color, but because of their experiences.
Yeah, can I add to that, Jamie?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I would. It's an interesting question, and I think it goes to this. We all have to recognize that the creativity, skill sets, ingenuity to build strong brand propositions are just inches, but in today's social context, 6 feet away from us. So what we're talking about here is that, and what we talked about earlier was that the face of the consumers change, the needs of the consumers have changed, and the authenticity required to engage consumers and brand propositions has shifted. For us to begin to start thinking that that a monolith of thinking and a monolith in terms of the makeup of people are going to move our agencies and our businesses closer to being successful in those arenas, I just don't think that works, right? And so we're not talking about in the context of diversity for diversity's sake. What we're saying is that we live in an industry, operate in an industry that's walked by talent the entire time, right? And which is why you see a higher number of African-American creatives, African-American strategists on their own as 1099s versus formerly belonging to agencies. It's not an absence of talent. It's not an absence of skill set. It's sometimes not even an absence of opportunity. But if you have the mindset of being an agency or a design firm, that existing as a monolith is going to prepare you and position your company and your creative product to resonate in the future, then you might be on a mistaken path. And so I love the question. It's never been about affirmative action or just occupying seats for the sake of diversifying seats. We're talking about hiring individuals and bringing individuals to the organization, have a demonstrated skill set and a talent that's scalable, and having them have the same opportunity and the same access to grow inside of companies. And so we want skill first, and then we start to think about ethnicity.
I couldn't agree more with what Sean and Jamie have offered. Kind of metaphorically, what I would say is we're trying to help create a better recipe for the industry as a whole. And these efforts are an effort to add a little bit of salt to the meal that we're creating. And blindly adding salt or eating salt is not going to do anybody any good. But done with intention and as a part of the recipe, it makes the whole thing better.
Street, do you want to ask the next question? We've got one from Anna.
Yeah, we had another question in the chat from Anna, and she said, I wonder if the members of the coalition would ever evolve to accept apprenticeships as a method to gain experience. That would open up doors for many talented BIPOC where higher education is prohibitive. So.
Yeah, I'll lean into this just a little bit. I mean, I think apprenticeships is certainly something that we have already begun to talk about, both within this coalition, as recognizing the many different potential ways in, given that there is no one way really to solve any problem. And so this has come up as a part of the conversation. I don't think that we have ruled anything out at this point in terms of how we might be able to do this. Additionally, I'll add that, at P&G, we are partnering with other organizations that do exactly that, bringing in young people, both in their junior and senior years of high school, as well as in their freshman and sophomore years of college, to kind of give them exposure. And that becomes an apprenticeship of sort, right? So some of these students aren't even design students, right? Particularly the high school students, but we're trying to give them exposure to careers and peripheral opportunities that they may not have considered. So I think the idea of apprenticeships is absolutely a good one, that there are a lot of self-taught designers in this world who are really good. There are a lot of folks who did not take a traditional path to really be able to add a lot of value to the industry as we know it. And I think we need to be respectful and recognize and do what we can to really be able to accelerate any and all efforts to make this better.
And I would add to what Tysonn is saying is the self-taught piece. I think one of the expectations of being in a collective is being open to different pathways into design and advertising. And so we will hear us talk about formal pathways as relates to traditional education systems. But we're also talking about mentorship, we're in addition to apprenticeship. And so I think the challenge will be, we're challenging everybody in the collective to be open and not look at one source as a means for a pipeline of talent, but to be open to not only looking at multiple ways of attracting, but then also being open to maybe non-traditional ways of advancing talent as well.
And then just at Hyperquake, since I've been there for about 6 or 7 years, mentorship is probably my passion. Growth is, I get more joy out of seeing other people grow than sometimes I forget that I think I'm growing too, but I just really like to see people grow and learn. And so we've continued to have schools in, like partnering with like DAP camp and things like that, and bringing them in for a day or a half a day, and just sharing what we do, and allowing people to kind of just see what a day in a life looks like in a sense. And I think we can continue, our goal is to continue to push even further reach out of Cincinnati. How do we really start to help other students? Because I think, just as Jamie and Tysonn said, I fell into design too. I thought I'd just be a starting artist. I wasn't. My mom kind of, I think, always had her fingers crossed that I'd be okay. But yeah, design just sort of, I had no idea that there's a whole world out there. And so I think it's how do we continue to bring people in and then show them all the different facets of design. It's not just what, right here, there's 70 people on this call. We all do something a little different. And so it's so interesting to know that we can all have that opportunity to kind of share what we do.
You guys have said more than I could possibly say, so you've covered everything I had in my mind and heart as well.
Awesome. Well, I think Ashley had a question, and I think it's really important. So you want to go ahead and ask it?
Yeah. So I was just curious if you, how long you think it would take to actually start seeing results with this coalition?
So fantastic question. It's one we've talked about a lot, and what we've grounded ourselves in is that what we're creating here, there'll be some low-hanging fruit. We'll have some small wins in a year or 2 years, but the real wins and successes of this coalition, if we do it right, we're talking 5 to 10 years down the road, and hopefully evergreen. I mean, the goal of the people on this coalition that thus far that have created this is we want to create something that is longer lasting than us in this industry, right? And hopefully we're creating a structure, a model, a strategy, an approach that continues on past us. Once you get to that first 5 to 10 year mark, you start getting those big successes. It becomes continual because you've now built the foundation. But if we're talking about talking to middle school kids and bringing awareness to middle school kids, if they do go higher education, you're talking 10 years before they are in the workforce, right? So we're very self-aware that, you know, it's a long-term game that we're playing here. It's not going to solve the problem overnight, but it's about building the foundations and the structures to solve the problem ultimately.
Yeah, I think I'll add to Jamie. I think I love the question because there is the fierce urgency of now, as well as then taking enough time to build appropriate infrastructure to replicate this and do this well. There's two things I just want to share real quickly. The first is we have to recognize that each agency, design firm, and marketing group is starting this journey at a different place. So I think the near-term piece is helping people understand that it's okay to start from where they are. But I think what can happen is the spirit of being intentional and deliberate as it relates to looking at their infrastructure can happen right now. The other parts that can happen right now is the fact that we can immediately begin to look at practitioners that are in our design industry today that are extremely talented, have strong portfolios, but don't have the relationships and connections to be able to then introduce their capability to work that is out there. So that is a near-term thing. I think what we're trying to be patient on is recognizing that as a collective, what we're agreeing to do is create an entity to provide the resources and best practices so that these agencies can foster the strongest environment possible to attract, retain, and scale Black employees and communities of color. That piece is going to take a huge amount of time, primarily because of the fact that each infrastructure, policy, everything else is different. But I think what we can do in the near term is begin to start looking at the collective talent that's around us, looking at the collective amount of work that's there, beginning to start to build bridges and networks to create greater access and greater opportunity for everyone as we build a stronger infrastructure, as Jamie was talking about, that allows us to be a resource and provide the right level of engagements to leaders within these firms and these agencies to be able to make this a more routine thing. So 5 years down the road, we shouldn't be having a conversation talking about the importance of Black talent. What we should be in a place where people are assessing the infrastructures in terms of whether or not they built an environment that can unleash the full potential of the creative, the full potential of strategy, account management, finance that can be found in our agencies today.
Yeah, I mean, I would just add that, you know, like anything worth doing, you have to be persistent and consistent in the efforts to get it done. So, you know, if you were going to the gym and trying to be more fit, you're not going to expect to see all the results that you would want after the first week or two. If you're saving for retirement, you're not expecting to have your entire nest egg built in the first 5 years of your career. These are things that I believe that if we do well and stay committed to them, we'll start to return greater and greater dividends over time. You know, there's been some discussion about mentorship. There's been discussion about internships. There's been discussion about, you know, inviting people in. The more opportunities we create within the industry and the more people we have being willing to participate as a part of that, the greater results we'll be able to see. So the more people we can put into this ecosystem who are willing to invest back into that same ecosystem will help us be able to realize even greater results.
Well, thank you so much, everybody. We are at a little bit over time here, so I want to be respectful of everybody on the call. But thank you so much for your presentation and for sharing some insight about, what things you guys are working on. I think we're all very excited to see everything come to fruition and all the hard work you guys have been putting in. We did get a couple questions that we weren't able to answer during our time here, so we're going to drop them in the Slack channel. And I can also email them out to you guys too if you guys aren't able to join Slack and want to respond in your own time and stuff. But thank you so much to all of our presenters today, to Tysonn, to Sean, Jamie, and Holly. Thank you so much for all of your help and for, coordinating and helping to put this together and sharing, everything you guys have been working on. I think everyone, I'm just looking at all the chats in here and seeing all the discussions that people are having. So. But that's it for today, at least for lunchtime. And then tonight, the next event we have this evening is our Distillery Panel, barrel aged branding, which will be really exciting. So please come with your drink of choice. I believe that I think it's already on social, that we've got a cocktail and mocktail list for everyone's enjoyment as well. So we hope to see you all this evening. Thank you again to Holly at Hyperquake for sponsoring this event and to all of our Midwest Design Week sponsors for this week. Have a great rest of your day, guys.
Thanks for having us, Ashton, and thanks for listening, everybody. This is really it's a group effort. It's gonna take everybody to solve this. So it's really important that everybody buys in and pushes for this charge. So we're just thankful for the opportunity to talk to all of you.